Explorations presents Amateur Hour.
Hello everybody, welcome to Explorations. It's Rob, Damien, and Ian here with you for another installment of Amateur Hour. Tonight we're talking about rock climbing shoes. Why are we talking about rock climbing shoes? Because Ian has convinced me to go rock climbing with him and I own zero equipment. Luckily, Ian has all the equipment but no shoes. So it's kind of a bring your own shoes deal. So, me being the amateur and Ian being the expert and Damien being somewhere in between there, we're talking about rock climbing shoes. So I think, first of all, Ian, what makes you the expert on rock climbing shoes? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh, gee, wasn't ready for that one.
Surprise!
And go.
I guess I started climbing back in high school, ended up doing competition, fell in dead last because I had no idea what I was doing. I had to rent the shoes and the equipment. And when I managed to get a job overseas teaching in Korea, that's where the climbing kind of took off, and there's mountains everywhere. It got to a point where for 2-3 years, I was on a 400-meter phase for the weekend. And Monday to Friday, I would be doing my normal teaching English job. So that experience led me into the next kind of thing of trad climbing, where you plug in your own gear, that you don't have bolts to secure you into the rock if you take a whipper. One thing led to another. Got me into ice climbing, mountaineering stuff, and then so that's a whole another thing we could talk about on another session. Yeah, so that's perhaps a bit about my rock climbing background there. What Rob said, one of the first pieces of gear if you're looking to get into climbing, it would probably be shoes for a couple of reasons. Most people would have a harness already that they're willing to lend, but shoes are a lot more custom fit to your feet. And some of the materials that are used, like leather, will eventually conform to your foot, and it'll be weird stepping into someone else's conformed shoes. And the size is another thing. And so you're well fitted into that shoe. I'll stop there for now. I'm rambling on, I feel like.
All right, well, I mean,
Good.
I've climbed indoors 3 times, so this is definitely going to be a very different, exciting experience for me. And I obviously have no gear, so shoes will be my first, as I mentioned. But what about you, Damon? I know you've climbed a bit here, and now that you're in BC, you've done some climbing.
Yeah, I've done some climbing here in BC. Is funny enough, Ian and I think, through the magic of fate, started climbing at the same time in different spots. So when he was getting into it in Korea, I was really starting to get into it in Ontario. Mine wasn't with a mountain, weirdly. So I definitely had to hang out and climb indoors, and I would say, like, without question, that's where I'm comfortable for anything. I've climbed indoors probably grand total dedicated time, maybe like 7 years total, maybe 7 or 8 years. So I'm definitely much more comfortable of an indoor climber than I am an outdoor climber. I've probably outdoor climbed in Ontario, maybe a dozen or so times, nothing too crazy. And then here in BC, maybe like a little bit closer to that, a little less than a dozen times, I would say, in BC as well. For my certification, I am lead certified, which means I can climb something while putting in my own rope as I climb up. But I'm not anywhere near as cool as Ian, who can do trad climbing, and the idea of trad climbing still terrifies the heck out of me. So, yeah, not going near that anytime soon.
Right on. So,
Yeah.
shoes. I'm looking for shoes. I don't want to spend a fortune on shoes, and I know they're not crazy expensive as far as the shoes go, but what's a good starting spot for someone like me who's probably only going to climb like 2 or 3 times a year?
a lot of people in around Ontario and southwestern Ontario specifically do a lot of bouldering and sport climbing. So on this benchmark, a beginner type of shoe would look a little bit like this. So it's a little bit, and it has a little bit like a normal walking shoe in a way, right? But this is the Scarpa Helix. I really like this shoe. I don't think this is necessarily a beginner shoe if you're going into crack climbing, for example. But the style of climbing around southwestern Ontario, bouldering and sport climbing, the La Sportiva Mira VS is a lot better for that. You see, it's you have that shark fin shape.
Super aggressive.
That's put together. Yeah, they are super aggressive. This is a really good shoe for long sport routes that just go on and on forever, like 10 pitches of sport climbing or something like that. And then you have something like the La Sportiva's solutions, and they look a little bit like this, but in the bottom part here, you can actually see what's the rand that runs around the shoe. It's bare. There's no rubber in the middle. And the reason for that is so that it's a lot more flexible to actually smear onto bouldering problems and routes and volumes. And so you have different types of styles and different types of climbing, different types of shoes to go for those. But for this style here, the predominant style of climbing, and for what Rob, I suppose, would be looking for in terms of a beginner type of shoe, would probably be something like the Helix. This is a little bit more expensive-ish. It's like $120 when I bought it, I think, or at least retail. You could get one that's the La Sportiva Tarantulace. Damien, you've worn those a good number of times.
2 pairs.
2 pairs,
Must
in
be
fact.
good.
I think are
Yeah.
actually.
They're fairly cheap. And the reason I got them twice is because I found them to be honestly like a pretty casual shoe, I want to call it. They're pretty universal for the less intense climbs. So like when we're talking about aggressive, typically we mean like how steep and how pointed you're going into a hold or a climb, right? And so for me, I'm not at that skill level right now. I haven't been climbing in like crazy little cracks like Ian's talking about or anything like that where I would need to like literally have my entire weight on the area that's about the tip of this finger, right? Indoor climbing is totally a different game though. So I definitely want to call that out. Like in indoor climbing in general, just go aggressive. Like there's the way those stupid holds are in indoor climbing is it's just you want a specific foot, a specific toe, and you want to just hug into that. So that would be my thing is like for outdoors, I'm much more neutral of a shoe, and then for indoors, I just go crazy aggressive.
Like when I buy shoes for other things, it's always like, oh, how comfortable is this? How does this feel on my foot? And then whenever I go to the rock climbing gym and put their shoes on, I'm like, oh wow, this really, really sucks. This is super uncomfortable. And then, I mean, when I'm looking now at buying a shoe and I'm reading forums online and everything, the sentiment is kind of like, your shoes are going to be uncomfortable, get over it. How true is that?
Yep. 100%.
Okay. Awesome. So something to look forward to.
It's not. I wouldn't say. And Ian, you've apparently owned like a million shoes, which is awesome. But for me, I've never had a shoe where I'm like, ooh, that feels good. You know, like I've never been in a situation where I'm like, what a comfortable shoe. This is awesome. I've had shoes that are like, wow, I can tolerate this while I do the sport the entire time. And then I have shoes where I'm like, dear God, I've finished a climb. I'm taking them off immediately because my feet are literally killing me. Like they are in pain from wearing these shoes.
So where's the balance in there then? What for someone like me, what am I looking for?
Yeah. I think Ian's got it on the head. That Helix is probably nice and wide, so it's probably a little bit comfortable, right? For me, the Tarantulas are that shoe for me, where they're a little bit more comfortable, forgiving, and neutral. So I can walk around in them, which is a novel idea, to walk around in a shoe. But yeah, it's for me, it's just those kind of less aggressive, more entry level kind of neutral shapes that are better for that
So
comfort. But what do you think?
I don't need to find a shoe where I'm just in pain constantly. It just might not be super pleasant to wear all day, kind of thing.
Yeah. Rob, you touched on the thing about the internet, which is hilarious to me, and it's like there's almost like a pride in how pained your feet are. So you got to kind of like look through that BS a little bit. Like it's true. It's totally true. For sure. Like everyone's feet are going to hurt. But I think there's certain people who just kind of go like, 3 sizes too small. It's got to be like I got to like your feet need to nobble within it and contort
there
like
was
it's
a
some
lot of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I guess my question to you, Ian, as the expert in shoes, is more so like, what is a good fit? Like, of course, it needs to be like super tight to your foot. I agree with that 100%. But where's that cusp of where it gets too tight? And what kind of things should you look out for if it's too tight? Because that to me is, I don't think anyone's gonna buy a rock climbing shoe and go, ooh, it's nice and comfortable and loose, because you're buying it wrong. But if you're buying it, I think the risk is you go too tight and then it's even more uncomfortable than it should be.
For the fit, I mean, honestly, just if it's your very first climbing shoe, just go that. And if you want to push your toes a little bit like that. That's it. Okay. Don't try and like crunch them underneath that. That's
yeah, no, I'm not doing
screw
that.
up your feet.
I'm not doing that.
Climbing shoes are not for feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just a little bit of curl and this is also really important. Dependent on the manufacturing production and the model of shoe, you're gonna have like single lined shoe, double lined, leather, synthetics. That's going to play a role as well in how much the shoe will stretch. Some shoes, like the Tarantulas or like the Helix, because they are leather uppers, they can stretch up to a size and a half. So keep that in mind. But at the same time, that means it's going to conform to your feet quite well and quite comfortably. So those types of shoes with leather uppers that are not lined on the inside with anything else, going to stretch. And so you could probably afford, when you're fitting the shoe, to scrunch your toes in a bit. And then as you start climbing into it, it'll start flattening out. But for a shoe like these So-Ills, for example, they are double lined. So a double line means they have something else inside to help prevent the stretching.
So that's actually kind of a good segue into my next question. And I don't know if it's answerable or not, but compared to like a normal shoe size, so I'm a size 13, am I looking for a size 13 climbing shoe, or am I going for the 3 sizes down and following the internet?
Depends on the brand.
Yes.
But size 13 street shoe size is going to be your benchmark, that's for sure.
Okay.
So start with a 13 and then adjust up and down from there by half sizes. Some brands even go like a third or quarter size up, which becomes a bit ridiculous, I think. But when you're looking for that perfect fit, man,
But general rule of thumb is go with your shoe size, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Start with your shoe size.
Start right? Like start with it.
Ian or Damien, if you had to recommend 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 different pairs of shoes for someone in my position to maybe check out, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I'll go first because mine will be probably a little bit shorter, I think. For me, the brand that I've kind of connected with a little bit more is La Sportiva. I find their shoes pretty comfortable. Both shoes I rock right now, the Tarantula and then the Mira. I remembered what it is. It's not the other one. It's the Mira. But I find those two being the kind of good healthy shoes, and they can be expensive. But they also cannot be expensive. So the Tarantula starting like $100. The Mirror one is probably closer to 200 something.
Yeah, the Mirror is a really good choice as well. And assuming they're the lace-up ones, I don't think the Mirrors have a Velcro. Yeah, unless you're talking about the Mirror VS, which these are, and they are super aggressive.
I think I am
And
talking.
they are Velcro. Yeah, well, this is the VS, right? So like it's a little bit different.
Same shoes. Ah.
Yeah, and so just really quickly on the whole laces versus Velcros. If you want a better, more comfortable fit, laces. Go with laces because they will wrap to each part of your foot and tighten to the shape of your foot. But the shoes, I think, for the Southwestern Ontario type of climber, for a gym climber, getting into it for the first time, the Tarantulas are a really good option. The Sportiva Tarantulas, the Finales are actually quite good as well. I didn't think the Black Diamond Momentums would be as good as they were, but they are. And finally, of course, my Scarpa Helix. I love the Scarpa Helix. I can't say I can't rave about it as more than I can right now. But they are like my slab climbing shoes, my crack climbing shoes. If I'm doing super easy 5, 7, 10 pitches of that, they're my go-to shoes. Because they're super comfortable. They can do a lot of the different styles of climbing that's out there. And especially if you're going to be in them all day, you probably just not have to take them off versus a lot more of the other aggressive shoes. So you got maybe, I guess, four options there to kind of mull about. And the fit is going to be key in all of those selections. And there is no one shoe that would fit everybody perfectly.
Awesome.
So does that answer your questions, Rob?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, obviously still a ton more we could talk about for shoes, I'm sure. But, I mean, for someone like me who's just getting into it, I think that's a good start. Got lots of options to look at.
So there you have it, some basic rundown of climbing shoes. There are several types of different climbing shoes out there, but for a beginner, like Damien said, the key thing is so that it doesn't hurt your feet and to have fun. Once you gain the experience of the shoe that you're wearing, you will eventually also find out what's working and what's not working for your feet. So hopefully Rob finds a nice pair of climbing shoes to wear for our adventures when we head out a little bit later in the summer. And stay tuned for that video because there's going to be a lot of hilarious videos, I'm sure, of Rob falling because I don't fall climbing ever.
Not once.
It's going to be interesting.
No,
climbing ever.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I would love to hear your comments on what shoes you love to wear as your beginner shoe. What's your first one, your second one, your pros and cons, what you loved and didn't love about it. If there is another type of shoe we didn't discuss here, put it down in the comments below. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, punch that like button as well, and we will see you in the next video.
See ya. My question was going to be, why is Ian still drinking out of that empty glass?
Oh, he came back. He's good.